Let's rock, baby.
The PlayStation 2 is easily one of my favorite consoles of all time. I mean, without it, I probably wouldn't be here today. As of 2019, still remaining the most successful game console ever created with an unbelievably diverse library, with most of my favorite games of all time originating on the thing. Seriously, you have no idea how much I love this console. I just had to get that out there, since Devil May Cry is one of those iconic franchises born in a legendary machine, although I never touched the series until last year. Crazy, I know. But like I said in the previous video, I never even knew action games were my thing until I first played Metal Gear Rising in 2017. I was just at a GameStop looking for something new to try, and I saw the then newly released Devil May Cry HD collection for the PlayStation 4 on the shelf, so I picked it up alongside the remaster of Resident Evil 4. Although I got so hooked in the DMC franchise that I now own multiple copies of like every game and can't put them down. So I still haven't even played Resident Evil 4, but all in due time. Despite owning several different versions of those games, I'll be reviewing all the games on the PS4, just so you know. I mean, as far as HD conversions go, I think the DMC Trilogy got treated pretty well. I mean, there might be a skybox issue here and there, but that's pretty small potatoes since all three games look amazing in 1080p. So a long time ago, there was a great warrior, the Dark Knight Sparta, as he defended the human world from the demon underworld time after time. I mean, literally, every game focuses on something he did that was amazing. But now, the demon underworld is challenged by his son, Dante, at his demon hunting shop called Devil May Cry. Suddenly, a woman called Trish appears out of the sky and rams a motorcycle through the door. She has powers and shows us the first of many times where Dante will just walk off getting stabbed through the chest. So he has powers, guns, and swords, and is personally out to kill demons since it is because of them that he lost his mother and his brother. Trish looks strikingly like Dante's mother, which sets off some red flags for him, but he takes her job anyway as they go to Malay Island to destroy Mundus, the demon responsible for Dante's loss that Sparta had once defeated before. From there, Dante explores the castle top to bottom, has memorable encounters with the creatures on the inside until reaching Mundus, and that's basically the summary. Dante himself is a joy to watch at DMC1. Despite not being nearly as off the wall as later games, he's really relatable in this game in spite of that, as he's here for personal motives and takes his mission seriously when it needs to be done. But it's his wisecracks that make him so entertaining as he just trolls the bosses.
What a big surprise. I hope for your sake you got something inside that big body of yours. This stinking hole was the last place I thought I'd find anyone with some guts.
The game does an excellent job building up to these encounters as well. Phantom, for example, shows up once, but then chases you 2 more times before the climactic final boss with him.
You're right. I'm his son, Dante. Sweet dreams.
And the same thing for Griffin, and when he gets defeated, this is when the 3 eyes of Mundus appear in the sky and punish him from above. It's so simple, but it's how you do build up and payoff. We've been getting chased around by these bosses, but only serve and worship Mundus, who can punish them from the sky. It just makes you wonder, like, geez, what is Mundus really like, and how are we gonna beat him if these bosses were already tough enough? The rule of 3 also works with the mysterious Nello Angelo, who has the exact same fighting style as Dante, but always has a strange reaction to getting beaten by Dante, ending with the reveal that he's actually Dante's brother, Virgil, who was defeated by and now serves Mundus, which only strengthens Dante's motive to go face off against him. And it does for the player as well. The game even makes me excited when new enemies pop up. Each new type of enemy you fight is given a cool introduction cutscene to show off their powers, as you then cut back to gameplay and tear them apart. It's just so satisfying no matter how many times I play through Devil May Cry. Story's not perfect though. I mean, it's revealed that Trish also works for Mundus. I mean, who didn't see that coming? When she betrays Dante, he turns on her, and then at the end she saves him, and now they're best friends. Trish doesn't really do that much in this game up until the very end, which is where most of her character arc is, so it's a bit poorly paced in that sense, but I enjoyed everything else in the story. Well, except the voice acting. 2001 was the tail end of games having really corny voice acting, and while Devil May Cry is nowhere near as bad as many 5th gen games I've covered on the show before, however, it's still not great by any stretch of the imagination. Really, Dante. I really like the laid-back voice he has, but his range of emotion is poor since the more dramatic lines sound really forced.
Don't come any closer, you devil!
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light.
Not many characters are voiced as is, but for what we do have, I mean, Trish is just kind of there, Mundus sounds really evil, and that's hard to screw up, and the bosses sound alright, but they're hammy beyond belief. The Devil May Cry series has never really grabbed me in regards to the soundtracks. I mean, there are some exceptions to this rule throughout the trilogy, since there are numerous tracks from all 3 games I really like, but in 3 and 4 especially, a lot of the music tends to fade in the background when clashing swords with and firing your guns at the demon hordes. But in the case of DMC1 and a lot of DMC2, the music just checks off all the right boxes for me. Devil May Cry is such a cohesive experience where every aspect of the game comes together to make the experience. The soundtrack will be quiet and ambient, but also really creepy as you explore the castle, and more holy sounding in the cathedral, uncanny sounding in the battles with Nello Angelo, and just plain action-packed in any other encounter, combined with the fantastic graphics for the standards of the time, as every area feels rich in detail with a unique story to tell in every room. And on that subject, Devil May Cry 1 is one of the best atmospheres I have ever seen in a game. I love how Dante has his own monologues to read as he reacts to every aspect of the castle. I love the timing of the music, the camera work, it's just so beautifully done, and this really makes Devil May Cry 1 stand out in a way no other DMC game does. DMC was quite the trendsetter. I mean, beat-em-ups were such a popular genre in 2D, however the formula had a really rough time translating into 3D. With Devil May Cry redefining how to handle combat in 3D, where DMC 1 is of course about taking down enemies, but also about exploring this castle, finding keys and upgrades. I wouldn't call this a full-on Metroidvania since it's pretty linear, but the design mentality is very similar as Dante will have to run through the whole castle, and when you find something, either A, you need to find a use for it to progress further, or maybe you already know the solution since places that need an item to progress will say so when you interact with them. So when you do find what you need, you'll have a satisfying aha moment and rush back to the place you need to use it in. It's designed that it's inherently rewarding and makes the game go by faster if you know what you're doing. At the same time, areas are extremely boxed in, so to increase exploration you get a lot of side rooms like a creepy bedroom or a room with a giant dinosaur. Cramped environments serve the game so well since you can focus on the enemies you're fighting all the while feeling like they're ganging up on you when multiple enemies arrive. And it also keeps the atmosphere really suspenseful since you never know what's going to be around the corner in this place, and that's just so engaging to play. And there's really cool set pieces as well, like shooting fireballs back at a dinosaur skeleton or the pirate ship starting to move and so on. As for the combat, which makes up the majority of DMC, the game throws new enemies your way left and right, so when going into it, Dante is left with his sword, Force Edge, with a few basic combos activated by timing the button presses after attacking the first time, like a basic 3-hit combo, a 5-hit combo, or the million stab, as Dante rapidly stabs his nearest opponent. Bonus points for doing this to more than one enemy at a time. Early on, Dante will find the demon-powered electric sword, Alistair, which has all the same combos as Force Edge only with electricity, and the Devil Trigger, which will show Dante in a demonic form as you can attack faster and with more ferocity. The characters under your health will show how much Devil Trigger, or DT for short, you have left, with you needing 3 to activate it. It can be refilled through taking damage, or if you're feeling bold, you can get 1 bar of DT energy filled entirely if you taunt the enemy during a combo, since this puts you in direct risk of being hit. Style is extremely important in Devil May Cry as the game was heavily marketed around that idea. During combos, you'll see a lot of words on the top of the screen, going from dull to stylish, and you of course want to keep that up as much as possible since you're graded for this by the end of every stage, and this goes towards a total ranking at the end of the game. By the end, Dante unlocks Sparta, the most powerful sword. However, while it does come with that benefit, you might still want to use Alistair from time to time since when using Sparta you can't use your DT, so it's a fair trade. Another weapon Dante gets is Ifrit, gauntlets you can use to bash enemies with your bare hands. You can switch between Alistair and Ifrit when you've come to a full stop and press the R3 button, which is very cumbersome, but you really won't be switching that much since some enemies are better dealt with a sword and some are better defeated by hand, which is a balanced system. Ifrit isn't as cool as it could be though. I enjoy using it while on DT since you can unleash a devastating combo of fire kicks, however otherwise the combos are a bit slow. Definitely something that gets improved on in later games. Although hand-to-hand combat that's just okay, it's not the only thing I don't like about Devil May Cry though. The controls work really well and feel really responsive, for the most part. There are some instances where I'm pressing all the right buttons but Dante won't roll out of the way of an enemy attack, or when my guns just like freeze up and I have to wait a second before they fire again, which as far as I can tell isn't an intentional design mechanic, it's just weak gameplay. The minimal platforming is also kind of weak as Dante's jump just doesn't feel right. It works in combat, however when jumping around it just feels kind of awkward. So getting back to the mechanics themselves, Dante always carries his twin pistols, Ebony and Ivory, which somehow have unlimited ammo. You only really use these for chip damage when in between sword strikes, so you definitely not want to rely on them too much. Throughout the game, you unlock more guns that do more damage, like the shotgun or the rocket launcher or the needle gun, which can only be used in these baffling underwater sections. Using guns during this game is also limited because you can't switch through guns on the fly like the melee weapons, which means you're gonna have to go through the menu to pick the one you want and use it really quickly. Yeah, I'll just stick to the pistols in that case. That's not me meaning to crap on the menu though, since I think this game has one of the coolest item selection animations ever with the sound effects and the demonstration. It just screams early 2000s style, and I just love it. Just switching through things takes too long in the heat of battle. Despite all the tiny issues I have with Devil May Cry 1, the game is just so addicting to play. When I was talking about the atmosphere just now, that was one of the things that kept me going the first time. It's just so damn easy to get lost in this world as it's like no other game. I also never got my ass kicked in a game as much as Devil May Cry my first time through. This game will test you if you aren't already well versed in the modern day action genre. I only had Metal Gear Rising under my belt, so obviously this game was tricky, especially since the game runs on a live system. Lose them and you're going back to the save point, which is why I advise that you save after every mission, so that's what I did. However, conquering most of the DMC series and going back to DMC 1, it wasn't that bad with the difficulty. But that's because my skills have just grown. I mean, geez, I remember my first run of this game, it felt like forever before I got to a boss fight, but now it's within a half hour or so of game time. I also had a decent stock of yellow orbs for most of the game as well, until the very end when I was basically hanging by a thread, getting game over after game over on the final boss with Mundus, and if you want to stand a better chance, then this is why you buy upgrades. Using the currency red orbs, you can take them to these statues and buy things you'd want, like a blue orb which increases your maximum health, or if you don't want to buy those, you can alternatively look for blue orbs which will increase your health if you find 4 of the fragments, much like heart pieces in the Zelda games. Purple orbs increase your maximum DT, yellow orbs for more lives, or green stars for a health pickup. But if you want more offense, you can buy additional moves like the Stinger, allowing you to do a quick stab towards an enemy. And this is where replay value really comes in for DMC. From what I can tell, without grinding, you will not be able to buy every upgrade in this game in one playthrough, but this is the beauty of it, since beating the final boss will allow you to play through the whole game in hard mode, with all your abilities and weapons carrying over as you continue to grow your funds and become the ultimate Demon Slayer. As you'll see, content is something the original DMC trilogy has in spades. The boss fights themselves are also really good and very well spaced out. The build-up I talked about in the story carries over since you battled Phantom and Griffin twice and Nightmare 3 times, but the repeat encounter is in a much different battleground which changes the way you attack, but the boss itself also gains new abilities changing the way it fights you. I didn't like any of the Nightmare fights though, just not a boss with a fun strategy to avoid or get hits in on, with the camera during the final fight actually sucking. The Nello Angelo fights working on the same philosophy, and these are my favorite bosses. There's always something great about a one-on-one boss against an equal, and I'm glad DMC gets this right. Although I don't know why the first phase of Mundus just turns into the Shadow the Hedgehog final boss, but the rest of the final boss is well done, and a worthy challenge to send Devil May Cry off on.
Jackpot.
In the end, Trish and Dante save each other and escape Malay Island as partners in crime, ready to battle whatever demons come their way. Despite the story not being anything mind-blowing, this was a good ending.
Okay, let's get it over with in 10 minutes. Can't let a single one of those suckers live.
5 minutes.
More than enough.
But yeah, that was Devil May Cry, and upon revisiting it, I had a blast playing through this game. It's clearly shown its age in many ways, however, as the father of the modern-day action genre, it's impressive how good the game actually is for an early PS2 title. It was clear right when the game came out that this was an instant classic, a worthwhile time for any gaming enthusiast, and had a lot of potential as a franchise, and I agree with all of that wholeheartedly. I really appreciate this game and can't wait to keep coming back to it and gaining more and more experience. So that means we can talk about the next game, but this review may not be going in the direction you think. This game in particular is often hailed as the single worst Devil May Cry game, even surpassing DMC Devil May Cry the reboot. GameSpot even named it as the most disappointing game of 2003, with every single outlet in the gaming industry holding similar opinions. As someone who didn't even have the slightest interest in DMC till I just bought the DMC PS4 collection on a whim last year, DMC 2 had me really intrigued since I was completely unaware of the game's infamous status until I beat and fell in love with the first game. I've continued to come back to each and every Devil May Cry, and that includes DMC 2. Still fascinated with it since I could tell you what was wrong with it in many ways, but I kept playing it because I thought it was fun at the same time. But I wouldn't call this a defense, nor is it a rant view. I just wanted to say something about Devil May Cry 2. So let's begin. The story in this game is a bit of a letdown, and at its worst, it doesn't make any sense. The opening establishes that the new girl, Lucia, has called Dante to the museum as she gets attacked by demons while trying to take one of the artifacts. They leave a lot of blanks unfilled throughout, like how when Dante says she called, she marks the map above the display case. But the monsters attacking seem to be pretty spontaneous, so I'm not sure what the actual plan for Dante was to begin with here. This is, of course, just nitpicking, however the story does this sort of thing all the time. Dante arrives at the island of Vita Marley and meet with Lucia and her mother figure, Matier, as they inform Dante that an evil business owner named Arius is trying to collect the Arcanas to awake the power of Argosax the Chaos, a powerful demon. That is just the basic summary. The story just kind of stops after that since Dante finds the artifacts and that's it. No real development, as Dante is really detached from this conflict. It's revealed that Lucia was created by Arius, which is fine, I guess, but this is also a repeat of what happened in the last game with Trish. But emotional investment is a big issue in this game overall, so let's talk about it. One of the biggest outliers about this game is the personality of Dante himself. Personally, I'm pretty split on it. On the one hand, I totally missed the confident wisecracker from DMC1 and especially 3 and 4. It was because of this that we got really cool dialogue that made bosses feel memorable. However, DMC2 completely drops the ball on that one. Like how in Mission 8, when Dante tracks down Arius, he raises a giant fire monster out of the ground. Dante stares at it, the thing makes monster noises, and then it dies, and Dante just walks away. This goes for every single boss, if they even get a proper cutscene to introduce it to begin with. I mean, some of them don't even get that much. With the worst example being Phantom from DMC1 just appearing at the end of Mission 14. How DMC1 could build up and make me look forward to seeing a magma spider seems like magic when you compare it to this. This issue just makes the story feel like you're just flowing through the motions rather than riding a roller coaster with highs and lows. You could say that by this point Dante is just bored of combat and he's been doing it for so long that it's too easy for him to care, which I think sounds really cool, but they should have made it a big part of the story, like having it show in his dialogue, but he barely has dialogue, so we don't know. But on the bright side, I really like Dante in the last few missions. He has some great lines in the finale with Arius.
Is there a problem?
You! Is that the medallion? You switched them?
A false coin for a false god. King? Yeah. Here's your crown.
But in Mission 13 especially, Dante's lines to Arius just kill me every freaking time because the delivery is just so funny. I just can't even explain it.
That's just a piece of crap. Here's another 3 for you.
Other than that, the first 75% of the game is devoid of all that. Despite Dante's character being really simple in this game, that doesn't stop some people from overlooking cool details though. Like how Dante now does a coin flip like Two-Face before making a decision, which sounds kind of weird and pointless until you realize that actually isn't what Dante's doing. He gets to mess with people by making them unsure of what he's gonna do, however he never relies on luck, he makes his own since the coin is double-sided. He chooses his own fate and puts himself on the line for other people, which is a really nice trait for this older Dante. But yeah, build up and payoff is a massive area this story could have done pretty well, but it's squandered in many areas. As I'm hammered in, DMC1 made the rival and the main antagonist really memorable as you made your way to the final boss fight. DMC2's equivalent is Bulwark, who had a great design but literally no character. He sends his wolves after Dante at the start of Mission 5, attacks you in Mission 11, and makes his final assault in Mission 16. But he just appears, he and Dante exchange no lines, we know nothing about him, and it's just over in a flash. Which is just a waste. Arius is also really bland for the most part of the game until he suddenly turns into a maniac in the second to last mission. The problem with building up to him is the fact that the game is paced so poorly to the point where you just don't care about Arius. This game sends Dante all over the map and he's just going along for the ride. Like how Dante sees a helicopter take off in Mission 6, it lands on an offshore rig at the start of Mission 7, and then Dante is there with zero explanation for how he got there, with numerous other examples throughout the game. The concept art shows how Arius' massive tower was supposed to loom over the game, and that would have been amazing. I mean, think about it. If they spent less energy on making the actual rooms you run in around huge, and make more focused environments with Arius' tower getting closer and closer as you play, that would have been great. I mean, I could keep going, but this story obviously isn't very good, and those are all the big points. If Dante made a bigger deal out of the bosses, and the build-up and cohesion was much better, then the game would have been improved instantly. In the ending, Dante travels to the demon world and battles Argosax, and its final form, the Despair Embodied, and wins the day. And ride through hell on his motorcycle.
Yeah, let's go all the way to hell.
And when the Dante Must Die ending confirming that he did make it out of there. When DMC 5 was confirmed to take place after DMC 2, I got pretty hyped, admittedly. After all, my very first point on my DMC 5 wishlist was to not waste the Devil May Cry 2 follow-up, since this game was just ousted at the end of the timeline as to not have to deal with it. I have respect for companies acknowledging works that were poorly received, since it's not going away, you might as well follow it up, and I was happy to see that DMC 5 might finally be the one to do that. Originally this script was written a few months ago, but I decided to put the video on the back burner for a bit, and just recently it was confirmed that the Devil May Cry timeline received an update that arbitrarily decided that Devil May Cry 2 was now swapped with Devil May Cry 4 in the timeline placement, So yeah, DMC5 is just a sequel to 4, and 2 can safely be ignored for the rest of history. Look, DMC5's not out yet, and so on March 8th, I might be eating my foot, and I hope that's the case. However, if what I just said is true, then that's really disappointing, since again, I was hoping to see some cool things like Dante getting out of hell and such, but no. Most people, including the staff, hate the game, and so it must be forgotten. DMC5 is still setting up to be a great game, but again, that just bothers me. Anyway, I mentioned the concept art just now, and this need for the game to be bigger and better than what came before runs through the whole game at the developmental stage. I mean, just look at the trailer. A lot of 6th-gen games did this, where a big selling point was how big your world could be or how many worlds you could fit into the disc. But this doesn't hold up very well, as you just want to play the damn game. The confined locations of DMC1 made for a better atmosphere, better set pieces, and oddly enough, more variety in the locations and lighting and just about everything. The atmosphere made DMC1 stick out so much, and 2 just lacks it. At the start of the game, it's an instant downgrade from the last game with these unclear sword combos, which makes the combat really alienating of players for the first game who are looking to scratch that itch with an even better game than DMC1. But yeah, looking at Devil May Cry 2, this slow combat makes players use the firearms instead because of a thing called the dominant strategy, where a player will pick the path of least resistance even if met with several other options, which is incredibly bad design. I mean, a few of the bosses like the infested chopper are actually made much quicker when using DT attacks, but since the painless but terribly designed method is just standing there shooting, most people are going to do that, which is 100% on the fault of the designers for making that possible, which DMC1 and other games didn't do. When it comes to the bosses especially, the arenas are so huge to the point where just standing in the corner and shooting becomes such a no-brainer. Mission 5 needing no comment in that regard. Other bosses like Trismagi are just the worst, and should have nothing to do but stand there shooting for what seems like forever, barely even getting a chance to put a dent in it. Although, I really don't think sword combat is that bad in this game anymore. But like I said, the combos are so unclear to the point where a lot of folks just use one combo, think it's terrible, and call it a day. However, there were legitimate improvements in between games. For example, I think getting around as Dante, whether it be dodging attacks, firing, and locking on, are all done much better and more smoothly than DMC1. I love the addition of switching firearms in real time, and on PS2, DMC2 improved the controls as well, since the North American version of Devil May Cry 1 has this backwards control scheme where circle is jump, and the sequel fixes this. I also really like the amulet system and wish we saw more of that in later games. What this does is allow you to customize your DT for differing properties like ice attacks, or fire, or electricity, or flying versus being faster, healing more, or dealing out more damage. It's a really good system that encourages exploring to find them all and encourages customization. You get 3 swords in this game, but what really is disappointing about this is that instead of getting a couple of swords that scale in quality throughout the game and a hand-to-hand weapon, we get 3 swords: Rebellion, Merciless, and Vendetta. All 3 of these have the exact same attacks and properties, which wouldn't be too bad, but the lack of melee combat outside of Trish is noticeable. While the game tells you that Rebellion is the basic default sword, Vendetta is the most powerful with the shortest range, and Merciless is the weakest with the longest range, these are differences you would hardly ever notice when playing the game. I often use Merciless since my S-rank strategy relies heavily on stingers, and if that supposedly gives me the best reach, I'll use it. The problem doesn't just stop with them all being the same weapon, essentially. It also sucks that Dante has every single move he'll have by the end of the game at the beginning. Because of this, there's just no progression with the swords. In addition to that, the game never explains the combo system, where you press the attack button a certain amount of times and then push the analog stick to initiate a different combo. Pressing triangle 4 times is the default. Pulling the analog stick after the first hit starts the 3-hit combo, after the second initiates the 6-hit combo, and after the third starts the 5-hit combo. You can level up your swords, but the game doesn't tell you what this actually does, since it may increase damage, but it's to such a small degree that it's hardly ever noticeable, so I don't use my red orbs on that, I use them on blue orbs or purple orbs for more health and DT. So, up to this point, I get that this review is just another bash of DMC2, and of course most fans will have any objections to that. However, I just want to say that in spite of all that, I really enjoy Devil May Cry 2. But how can I with that many flaws? If I could compare it to anything else, it would be like when I first played Mega Man X3 all those years ago. The game is so universally disliked, which oddly drew me to both of these games and learning as much as I could about both. Like, I'm still trying to get jump canceling right in DMC4, but since DMC2 is so much simpler, I thought there wouldn't be anything to truly master about this game either, but that was false. Take for example, abilities that would be greatly expanded upon in DMC3 like dodging enemy attacks, or Dante shooting at multiple enemies at once which would be adapted for Gunslinger, or how Dante in mid-air can fire bullets directly at the ground. And what bothered me about that since my first playthrough of DMC2 was the fact that you can't see anything below you, which oftentimes can kill style, but learning to use it effectively alongside this shoulder tap thing that Dante does when pressing the attack button before landing is pretty fun and takes some time. Or how when locked on with the shotgun, firing it in between sword slashes allows Dante to fire the shotgun in different directions. When using his double trigger, Dante has different attacks for all the same combos you do when not in DT, and these attacks can be strung together for increased variety by going in and out of your DT. But with that comes the DT gauge. Of course, you can't do these attacks forever. What you can do is time the attacks well so that you only enter DT for the frames you would need for the different animations to be activated. Take this game's Million Stab for example. This really drains DT energy, so you swing your sword of choice twice, and then while locked on, enter DT, hold up on the analog stick and press the attack button, back out of DT as soon as possible, and you just found a new combo all the while barely spending any energy. My new favorite thing to try and do in this game is juggling enemies in the air. Send someone up in the air and Dante will do 2 kicks and then slam the guy to the ground. But if you time your kicks, you can do this in rapid succession and do more damage than you would have if you had done the standard 3-hit mid-air combo. Also, S-ranking this game is extremely difficult. As I said earlier, I rely on stingers to do damage, roll closer, shoot, stinger, repeat. That is because the timing and keeping the style rating up mid-combat is stingy as all hell. In this game, I know all these cool combos to do, but they fly in the face of this game's strict rating system since you get like 3 to 5 seconds to land another hit in or keep rolling before you can kiss that S goodbye, which results in the strategy I've discussed before. So that's why on previous playthroughs I would try not to take the chance of juggling enemies with the kick, because if you miss one kick, your rating's over. The shotgun combos have low damage and more often than not don't hit anything, and so on. But more devoted playing time is rewarded, as the more practice I have, the more seamlessly I can integrate these combos into my S-rank combat. It's going to take a long time, but I will get an S in every stage of DMC2 on every difficulty. It can turn a game that in a lot of instances is a cakewalk into a really difficult affair, as you're going to have to take no damage throughout any of the stages of the game. And this creates a nerve-wracking experience since I gotta keep my style up, I gotta always stay on the attack or else it's gonna fade away. It's a lot of stuff to keep track of at once, which is really difficult and creates a lot of replay value. Even though this game is inherently flawed in a lot of ways, I keep coming back to it because I really enjoyed the journey towards these conclusions myself. I've beaten Dante Must Die mode, the hardest difficulty in the game, and I played it by swapping between Dante and Trish, since you can unlock her as a playable character by beating the game on hard mode. And she plays very similarly to Dante from DMC1. I say similarly since it's the same moveset, but slower. I mean, it's DMC2, what can you do? But yeah, in Dante Must Die mode, there were numerous close calls. Nothing compared to the other games, I'm well aware, but still, I actually had a really memorable experience fighting the Mission 6 boss and the Mission 12 boss as Trish, really putting all of her abilities to good use, like throwing the sword at the enemy as it does damage, combined with shooting them or using melee attacks, the closest thing to hand-to-hand combat in this game. I spent an hour and a half on the final boss, but I kept pushing since I wanted to beat it and unlock that DMC1 Dante costume myself, as I used it in the new Bloody Palace survival mode where you have to reach the top floor without dying, which is extremely tense and fun. I ended up using Dante's Majin form several times in multiple boss fights since I barely did it in normal mode, but since I needed it more often in Dante Must Die, I learned how to play it. It was just all around a really satisfying experience because of the fact that this was all me, not a guide or anything like that. Of course, Dante Must Die has its own issues, like how some enemies just become more resilient where others get new attacks, which is much preferred, but ones getting more resilient can last forever, like the Savage Golem, or some bosses being the same drags like Trismagia, only with way more health and way more death on your end. But overall, this is what happens when you try a game out for yourself. Believe you me. I'm not trying to say any of this magically makes this game super amazing and everyone else is wrong. I'm saying that yes, it is inherently flawed, but there's still a lot of fun to be had if you try and mess around with it. The whole attitude of telling newcomers to a series to skip that one nobody likes has always puzzled me. I mean, if someone came up to me and asked what Mega Man X games they should play since they've never tried the series before, I would just say play all of them and in order, including X6 and X7, since you just might like it. You might see something no one else sees and share your experience, or you might hate it like everyone else, but in that case you can share your own experiences since you gave it a fair and honest shake. I'm just somebody who tries to absorb as much as possible of a series I'm into, and Devil May Cry was no different, and I advise that everyone else do the same.
Devil May Cry.
Devil May Cry 2 was obviously received very poorly, as I said before. However, like the first game, Devil May Cry 2 sold incredibly well, giving Capcom the finances and the confidence for a complete course correction, as the team, directed by Hideaki Itsuno, who was brought into the development of DMC2 really late into the cycle, as the unknown original developer was completely derailing the project. I mean, it says something about Itsuno's direction skills when he can make Devil May Cry 2 as good as it was at launch to begin with. The game didn't have any glitches and still was, in my opinion, a really decent game. So needless to say, he was ripe for the job of developing Devil May Cry 3 and saving this franchise's legacy.
Don't bet on it.
Now, how do I feel about Devil May Cry 3? Well, I know it's cliche, but I can't help it. This game is freaking fantastic. And that actually starts with the story. DMC1's story was decent and 2's was a mess, but 3 deserves to go down in history as one of the great video game storylines that takes advantage of the medium it's in. So let's start there. Devil May Cry 3 is a prequel set before DMC1, as Dante is far more inexperienced than we've ever seen before. I mean, the game opens at his shop, but it doesn't even have a name yet. A mysterious visitor called Arkham informs Dante that he's expected by his brother Virgil, as a large tower comes straight out of the ground with Virgil and Arkham perched on top. Dante's building is destroyed with a demon attack, and so he decides to go through the tower and take on his brother by climbing through the tower. At the same time, a mystery woman wielding numerous firearms and a motorcycle also gets in. The girl's name is Mary, but Dante calls her Lady, as it's revealed that Arkham is her father that she wants to take vengeance on, since he killed her mother as a sacrifice to become a god of the demon world. The tower itself has held the demons from going to the human world, and this was because of Sparta. Virgil's plan is to also open the portal to the demon world and possess the power of Sparta, but to get in, he needs the 2 amulets that Dante and Virgil were given as kids. It's why they want Dante to be there. That's the basic rundown, and it's probably the simplest DMC story on paper, but it's the most complex when giving it an in-depth look. The structure of the story is so cohesive. Like the first game, only this is much better presented and more interesting. The game is divided into 3 clear acts, with a boss fight with Virgil ending each one, with numerous twists and turns that keep you engaged when most people write off stories of games like these. Where the story gets most of its energy from is the fact that the cast of characters list is incredibly small. In my Metal Gear Solid 3 review from a while back, I talked about plot-driven stories versus character-driven stories, where the plot itself is pretty simple. However, in execution it's more complicated because of the fact that the characters are so well written and 3-dimensional in the way they interact with each other. Devil May Cry 3 has 4 characters in it, and yet it can keep you interested for a several hour-long campaign. Dante himself is back to his DMC1 cockiness, only ramped up to 1 million. In this game, he's brash, confident in his abilities even when he shouldn't be, and while these sound like traits for a character you wouldn't like, this is just the point. Dante is at times the same badass we've come to know from previous games and has plenty of moments to show it off, like the office scene at the beginning, but he has way more fun with it as he takes genuine excitement in what he's doing in this game as he rides on enemies or rockets. But he also gets moments where he's put in his place, like when running down the side of the tower, tearing through enemies, he's then eaten by a giant demon dragon, as we then have to play a level of him escaping the intestines, as a previous boss fight chases us through the area, which was actually foreshadowed several levels beforehand. The back and forth between Dante's victories and defeats in this game makes his wisecracks and attitudes really endearing, especially since he's learning as the game goes on. For example, he goes after Virgil for entirely petty reasons for the first battle.
I don't have a father. I just don't like you, that's all.
But then wants to settle the score in the second battle.
I'm sure you have time for one more game, right?
After interacting more with Lady and seeing her relationship with Arkham, he knows that opening the gates to the demon world is an evil plan that must be stopped, and that's where his head is at going into the final battle.
We're wasting time! We are the sons of Sparta. Within each of us flows his blood. But more importantly, his soul! And now, my soul is saying it wants to stop you!
It's real character development, something that the series has never really had for Dante before and had really poorly done for Trish and Lucia in DMC 1 and 2. Virgil is the complete opposite of Dante, as this portrayal of the character basically became the model for how to do an action game rival. I mean, this really isn't subtle stuff. Anyone could tell you this because it's obvious, because that's the beauty of it. It can be simple and effective at the same time. Virgil wears the opposite colored coat from Dante, where Dante has baggy pants, no shirt, messy hair, and a jacket. Virgil has a well-kept and elegant appearance. As Dante spouts wisecracks and one-liners with the bosses, Virgil stoically tears them apart. As Dante likes to look stylish when fighting said bosses, Virgil quickly disposes of them with quick and effective strikes. They really are polar opposites, but it's through these two and their feud that you keep playing since it's so entertaining. This is a method of build-up you can only get through video games, since your ass will be kicked by bosses when you fight them as Dante, and you'll feel really accomplished when you beat them, but then Virgil in the next cutscene just beats them in 5 seconds. This is an intentional move by the writers working with the game designers, since you'll be like, how on earth am I gonna beat this guy? It's like DMC1, only way better. You're gonna keep trying and trying and dying until you win, but the game's not over yet as you have to work your way to Virgil again, but every time you do, he gains more skills just like you did, upping the stakes with each encounter. Lady shares some of Dante's flaws at the beginning of the story, only she channels it through anger at all demons as shown by her expressions and attitudes toward Dante. But they both actually learn a lot through one another, as he learns about the deeper value to be found in this fight as he fights for humanity in the ending. But she also learns that, like any human, demons can also be good, and they can be bad as well, which is why they should work together since they have the same common goal.
I love this. This is what I live for! I'm absolutely crazy about it!
Which is why Arkham makes for such a good villain. He appears to be a worthless servant of Virgil, taking verbal abuse from the guy throughout the first 2 acts of the story, but in a, spoiler, incredible twist, it's revealed that he's the master manipulator behind everything. Out of seemingly nowhere, Dante receives aid from a magic clown called the Jester, who's incredibly entertaining to watch, as Dante just can't get rid of the guy no matter how hard he tries. But the Jester was really Arkham. Also, props to the voice actor for being able to pull off these 2 radically different performances, by the way. Really all the voice actors, as Dante's character has finally been solidified, with his actor, Ruben Langdon, playing the character in subsequent games, with Daniel Southward perfectly capturing Virgil's demeanor. Now back to Arkham's character. He wanted Virgil to get Dante's amulet so that this part of Sparta's seal would be broken, so to do that, he helped Virgil in regular form, acting as a servant who could be worthlessly dispatched, all the while helping Dante reach Virgil so that they can take each other out so he can just take the demon world for himself. He also needed his daughter since her blood would be the last sacrifice in order to accomplish his goal. On a second playthrough, a lot of his scenes are just a joy to watch, like the big reveal at the end of Act 2, but also during moments of foreshadowing, like when Dante and Lady find his dead body on the way to Virgil, but in a completely different spot from the one we saw Virgil kill him in, as the body is gone after they both leave, much like how the Jester comes and goes when he wants. So most of the build-up for the end of Act 3 is going through the tower one more time and stopping Arkham as Dante and Virgil actually work together to defeat him in a scene that's an instant classic for game storylines.
Remember what we used to say? Jackpot.
But then that's when the brothers face each other for the final time, when Dante finally overcomes Virgil and saves the human world. But he fails to save Virgil from his own desires of being in the demon world, which makes DMC1 more tragic retroactively, since Dante finding Virgil's amulet would remind you of this scene here.
No one can have this, Dante. It's mine. It belongs to a son of Sparta.
With a bonus end credit scene being Mundus finding Virgil as they get in a fight, and we know how that ends. With the game ending on the note of Dante and Lady continuing to hunt down demons as Dante's shop is finally rebuilt and named Devil May Cry. What makes this story so emotionally resonant is because of the strong family theme. 2 family feuds intersecting is what ties these 4 characters together, and that's something most anyone can relate to. Although not on a fantasy scale, but you know what I mean. It's a basic story device that splits characters that otherwise would have worked well together, but ideological differences stop this from happening. The good guys learn from it, the bad guys don't. It is as simple as that. Another thing this story has going for it, and this is a positive remark on the gameplay as well, and that's ludonarrative synchronicity. Every crazy thing Dante does in cutscenes is something you can do in the game. Run up walls? Check. Throw your sword? Check. Ride on enemies? Check. Dante gets new weapons from defeated bosses, however this particular demon doesn't die by the hands of Dante, he dies by the hands of Virgil in cutscene, and then Virgil gets his weapon and uses it against you in the second boss fight. He then loses it in the cutscene, and you take it from there. Stuff like that puts this game a cut above other games where the story and the gameplay can work together to make a great experience. The graphics are the best the series has seen up to this point, with great acting as I said, and a well-made soundtrack, although outside of the Virgil boss themes, it's personally not my cup of tea for the reasons I mentioned in DMC1. but upon a second listen, the boss themes are actually really good. But again, amongst the grunts and the guns, it fades a bit. But the animation work is fantastic, whether it be the pre-rendered cutscenes, the real-time cutscenes, or the gameplay animations. It's all so fluid and fast because of the motion capture done to get these scenes done, which makes the combat better than ever. Speaking of which, Devil May Cry 3 was the promised return to form for the series, and I don't think that's entirely fair. I mean, that would imply that this game abandons everything from 2. This game takes what worked in DMC 1, removes what didn't, does the same for DMC 2, and vastly improves the ideas that game introduced. For starters, our combos are back to being about timing, not directional inputs, which is great. This just feels more natural for action games. Another returning element is the single location from DMC 1. I don't think DMC 3 is nearly as atmospheric as the first game, but you still get to know this location, and the pacing feels so natural from mission to mission. DMC 2 added a bunch of new moves for Dante, as I discussed, like running up walls to evade attacks or shooting multiple enemies at once, shotgun combos, mid-air sword attacks, and so on. All of these shared the same controller, which was cumbersome. DMC 3 doesn't just toss out these good ideas, since there just needed improvement. This is where the styles system comes into play, and it is just beautiful. So at the items vendor and in between stages, you can change your style. At the start of the game, you only have access to 4. Regardless of which you have, you can do all the same things with the sword on triangle and all the same things with the guns on square. But it's the circle button that changes between styles to highlight different attributes. First is Trickster, which specializes in evasive maneuvers like a quick dash to get away from attacks, and the ability to run up walls like Devil May Cry 2. Second is Swordmaster, which places emphasis on your Devil Arm abilities like being able to toss Rebellion at enemies or sending enemies flying in the air with Beowulf. As a very offensive Devil May Cry player, this was the style I went through for most of the game. If only because I thought dodge rolling and jumping was enough for me to get away from enemy attacks, and I only use guns for chip damage like I said in DMC 1, so I need to emphasize my swords the most. Gunslinger allows you to do more gun tricks like aiming at multiple enemies with Ebony and Ivory, which comes so much more naturally in this game as you don't have to fiddle with the analog sticks to do it. Shotgun combos that are much more effective and a lot quicker on the draw as well. Royal Guard emphasizes defense as you can block attacks with split-second timing and then split through enemies. It's a great style as you can do a lot of damage with it, although I'm really bad at timing, so Royal Guard is one you'd see me use the least. The more you use these styles, the more they grow in abilities, as you can really become an absolute combo machine, and it's just fun to watch, fun to play, and therefore incredibly well designed. Later you unlock Quicksilver, allowing you to slow down time for more combos, and Doppelganger, where you can double yourself for twice the damage. All really cool stuff, however these two, especially Doppelganger, came so much later in the game, so I just focused on Swordmaster. But speaking of styles, another absolutely phenomenal improvement made was the style meter. In previous games, the style rank was a bit messy since in DMC 1, I'd never know what I was actually doing right or wrong to get high and low marks. And in DMC 2, there was just next to no time before you had to land the next hit or else your style rating would just completely vanish. The style meter is displayed beneath your rating, and it's a massive help since it gives you a clear window of time to land the next hit, but at the same time you can't just spam like you could in the last game since the variety of your combos is equally important to a high rating as actually hitting enemies, with taunts greatly contributing to your DT gauge and the style rating. Keeping the variety high should be pretty easy since there are just so many combos for every weapon, and every weapon is great in its own right. I of course got plenty of use out of Rebellion, but Cerberus provided great coverage for crowds of enemies up close with the fast strikes, Agni and Rudra being one of my go-tos since these blades just clean house with the majority of enemies. There aren't many things you can't do with them. I mean, you have powerful swipes in the air, less powerful but faster airstrikes, a dash attack for crowds up ahead, a whirling tornado when enemies are up close. It's just a great weapon. Nevin may seem obscure at first, but this demon-powered guitar is great for crowd control and really dishes out damage when you get the actual combos right. With Beowulf being the hand-to-hand combat I was looking for, and Ifrit from DMC 1 with numerous fast combos tearing through demon after demon. Now for the really cool stuff. As my constant praise of Metal Gear Solid 3 has shown, I really love games where you can master crazy skills that a first-time player can't do. But the game is still fun either way. That is a high-quality balance. But yeah, you will see DMC Masters perform the art of jump canceling, a really cool technique where there will be a few frames after you hit an enemy in the air where you can then jump off said enemy and then your air combo will reset, and you can land more hits in the air than possibly ever intended, giving the game another layer of depth. I myself have been practicing at it and I have gotten really good at it. Not 100% consistent, but I am sure that by my next playthrough I'll be able to do it with ease. This is real mechanical depth, and that's what separates good games from great games. Firearms are of course back, and there's a decent variety of these too. However, again, I don't use many of the other options other than the pistols because I just use them for chip damage when I can't use my swords, so as a result I never really upgraded my guns or used the alternative ones. What I once thought was a setback in the DMC5 wish list was how Dante can only carry 2 devil arms and firearms at once. I much prefer just having everything at your disposal like in DMC4. But as I realized with DMC1's upgrades earlier in the video, only times 10, was that DMC3 is a game where you physically can't get everything out of it in one playthrough. I don't mean you won't be satisfied, since you more than will. However, you can't maximize the power of every style, you can't get every single combo unlocked for every weapon, and that's what real replay value looks like. I want to come back since this is a great game, but in the process of coming back to a meaty game, I have weapons I still need to upgrade, I have styles I need to get to level 3 and unlock even more abilities, and it never gets old. Sure, the tower's not as atmospheric as DMC1, but since the only purpose of this structure is to house demons, they get really creative with the environments as we're showing new and bizarre enemies around every corner that require you to give them a different strategy than the last room or else you're gonna get wrecked. Oh yeah, this game is difficult. Even now, after having beaten the game a couple of times, I still die to regular enemies every now and again, and also die to bosses I have mastered my strategy for since they hit hard, hit frequently, and always keep the pace going. But the more you play, the more tactics you can use against them, like riding on enemies to get a few hits in and then send the guy slamming into the wall. Or throwing your sword to block boss projectiles and get health restores out of it. Like I was saying, I've beaten this game a couple of times now, and I still died to the first Virgil boss. I still died several times for the second Virgil boss, even though I know what to expect. I died so many times to Arkham my first playthrough that I had my strategy locked in and I didn't die at all for that one. But the point is just that the game will always be keeping you on your toes no matter how many times you've played. And the fun doesn't have to stop there, since you can also play the game as Virgil and get more cutscenes out of the story as he interacts with Arkham. But then you also get to play as him, using a lot of the moves he used during the boss fights, and it's just a joy. I mean, it sucks it doesn't get original levels, but still, it's a fun novelty nonetheless. Also, the higher difficulties come in for Dante's campaigns, and Dante Must Die mode in this game is just brutal. You die in like 2 hits and enemies are so strong. It is just so much fun to play and so much fun to experiment with. And I can only imagine how much longer it would take to S-rank this game than the praise I gave Devil May Cry 2 S-ranks just a few minutes ago. This game is really just bursting at the seams with content. This game is just so unbelievably good. Yeah, it's not that I hate challenge, folks. My favorite game of all time is Metal Gear Solid 3. And you know what game's right up there next to it? Devil May Cry 3 Dante's Awakening. My second and now third playthrough of DMC3 has just given me everything I want in a video game. Balls to the wall action, a great memorable story full of emotions, satisfying, simple to use, difficult to master combat, varied levels, varied bosses, varied weapons and techniques, depth that goes through the roof to where you will still be learning things about this game well after shutting the console off, and that's the hallmark of a fantastic game. Like I said at the start of DMC3, is this a cliche opinion now? Yes, but that's because DMC3 is just that good. If you have any interest in the action genre, you will be doing yourself a disservice to not play this game. But that leads into the conclusion. I think the Devil May Cry trilogy is really good. And I also really love Devil May Cry 4. Such amazing games that you can get so accessibly now. All 5 of the released Devil May Cry games are on PS4, Xbox One, Steam, PS3, and Xbox 360. I would recommend playing all of them, since like I said in DMC2, making your own conclusions is very important. I gave DMC1 a shot and really enjoyed it, so I played 2, really found a lot to love in that package, and that led me to playing 3, which is one of my new favorite games of all time, with plenty of playtime to come, I'm sure. But really though, that's all I have to say for this DMC Trilogy video. Again, I absolutely love it and couldn't recommend it enough. Although if you guys want me to, I can try to squeeze in a DMC4 and DMC Devil May Cry video, but for right now, all I can say is that DMC is a great series, and I think I've finally got my feelings for this series off my chest. And I think we should all show our support of it as we come close to the release of Devil May Cry 5, which is shaping up to be a fantastic game. But on that note, I thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.